consulting, delivery, and
Thank you very much, Todd, and thank you to all of the sponsors for this presentation today. And certainly, I appreciate the presence of all of you who are listening in. Um, Based on those who pre-registered, we have a tremendous list of folks from consultants to CEOs of organizations. As I was thinking about this presentation today, it occurred to me that in some recent research that I was reviewing, that over the last decade, the number of hours that organizations around the world have been dedicating on an annual basis to training for employees has gone from 37 hours a year to 59 hours a year in the last decade. In that time, we've also seen a movement to use technology, and especially these forms of learning, from roughly 15% to 70% of most training and development initiatives and organizations around the world. In fact, I'm sitting in North Carolina in the United States. This is the third presentation I've done today. I had a group from Europe and Africa earlier during my day, as then a later presentation with folks from Asia, Singapore, China, in exploring other topics in leadership. My only point is that we live in an age where it's going to be vital that we take a look at the ways in which people learn and how we use technology to accelerate learning at the speed of need. As Todd mentioned, I've been in this field for a long time. I have a commitment to researching an array of questions about both what leaders need and what are the best ways to meet those needs. And throughout the years, I've managed to publish a variety of books and publications or be a part of an array of initiatives which have delivered what I consider to be substantially evidence-based material for folks like yourselves, whether you are the leader of a group or a large corporation, or if you're an individual who consults with and coaches with folks who are doing those things. And when we use the word leadership, at least often in North America, we tend to think of it, at least in my way of approaching leadership, as any individual who is providing direction, who's seeking to facilitate alignment of those people who are needed in order to achieve various objectives, and who will do things to engender commitment. So direction, alignment, and commitment become sort of the core primary activities of folks who are in the role of leader. And that would be true of a person who's leading a small organization or a large organization, a government agency, or some group or community enterprise. We know that when we say words like direction, alignment, and commitment, that those are sort of at the 40,000 foot level. There are in fact a whole array of behaviors that you engage in as a leader to foster the communication of direction. There are a whole array of things you do as a leader or a manager in an organization to facilitate commitment and engender, facilitate alignment and engender commitment. And in fact, that question of what are the kinds of behaviors that leaders engage in and that we see in managerial behavior that gets classified as leadership is summarized actually from these three independent research-related organizations. At the Center for Creative Leadership, which is a not-for-profit, the largest not-for-profit institute in the world, dedicated to studying the question of what makes for effective managers and leaders. We have a list of qualities that they believe are going to be essential for leaders to be successful in their roles on the global stage. SIOP, which is the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychologists, which has members from all over the world, Asia, Europe, and North America and South America are a part of SIOP, one of the largest professional groups who have ongoing projects to study what are the kinds of things that lead to effectiveness inside of organizations. And SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, is in fact another organization which now entertains members from HR-related roles from folks around the world. It used to be when I would go to conferences sponsored by these organizations that you would rarely see what I would consider a substantial international presence. And today it is certainly the case that in most of these professional events there are large numbers of internationals from Asia, folks from India, China, Thailand, who travel to these conferences and contribute to the research that is what we rely on to help us help you be successful when you are in the management role. Now, one of the things that we find interesting is that we're always interested in what typical managers and executives are good at and what they're not good at. And for the sake of this presentation, we will not pay attention to the numbers in parentheses. That's a reference point to something else. But you see here listed the top 13 kinds of behaviors that typically get rated as the highest for people who are in management roles. And we know what are the things that people typically are rated the worst at. Now, the sample of data that helps produce this sort of summary actually includes a large number of folks from international related roles, and it seems that no matter who does the study, we see very similarly the same results, meaning that developing people, understanding others, being patient, managing conflict, etc., and motivating others are all things that people believe are important. You can't very well get commitment and alignment if you're not dedicated to motivating others. But yet often rated at the bottom when people were asked how effective is the manager at doing these things. These are the things that tend to be at the bottom. We also know that when an individual comes into your organization as a contributor, perhaps he or she started in as an accountant, that if in fact they're going to take on a larger set of responsibilities, they will have to show an action orientation. They will have to be folks who persevere, who indeed communicate that they are and show that they're interpersonally savvy, that they have high quality decision making and problem solving strategies, that they deal with conflict well, and that they're able to take various perspectives. If they achieve those things, they're likely to make it to a management role which has a higher level of responsibility, and while they're in that management role over a period of time, we know that there's some things that they must learn in order to take on yet the next level in organizational life. They need to be able to have strong peer relationships. They need to show a consistent drive for results. that they can organize complex issues and present in ways that inspire others, and be able to stand alone when they feel strongly about an issue and influence others while taking that stand. We further know that those who make it to senior ranks who want to be effective executives will need to, in fact, show political savvy, be effective listeners, understand and know what being a good planner and negotiator is all about, what setting priorities are, and in fact building peer relationships in order to be as effective as possible. So we know that if we ask the question, what are the master competencies and behaviors that will in fact elevate a person from their being a contributor to over the arc of their career, being highly successful in management related functions, it is these particular behavior sets that enable them to be extraordinarily effective. Now, this is what we know from massive data sets, literally data sets with millions of data points. In any case, when you're looking at large data sets, you know that what may be true for 1 million people is not necessarily true for the person sitting next to you. In general, though, we have a good set of knowledge these days about the kinds of things that contribute to leaders being effective inside of organizations, as well as ongoing evidence, and this is just one sample, ongoing evidence of what leads to problems when you are not spending time building relationships or adjusting to changing conditions or building a team. You're likely to have problems and you're likely to have difficulties. One other thing that this enormous research, these research trends have given us, is the capacity to take a look at two critical dynamics in understanding the development of others, which is to say, how is a person performing, let's say, on dealing with ambiguity or on innovation management, and what is the evidence that he or she has the potential to develop more of those skills and more of those capabilities. And it is at this particular point where we turn our attention to questions of learning. It's important to know what are the things that make for managerial effectiveness and success in a general way, and to begin to more personalize that as you think about your context and your setting. But we know that if we really are going to help individuals inside of our organizations achieve these behaviors, that there is a critical skill, a critical perspective that's going to be vital for the person to take on additional responsibilities and take on the behaviors he or she needs in order to be effective in a highly global and dynamic changing environment. Many years ago now, and this has been replicated any number of times in different scenarios, researchers took a look at what makes for a learning experience. And what we found is, and as I said, this has been replicated now so many times that it's accepted as pretty much the way in which it unfolds as an adult, that we get to a certain plateau in our behavior, and in that plateau we maintain that behavior until something prompts us to make a change. That prompt could be feedback from a boss. It could be participation in a leadership development experience. It could be a conversation with a peer who says to the manager, you know, I've observed that you when you stand up to present, you seem to be disorganized, and the information you put on the screen is often filled with errors. And then, of course, the person who hears this, who may be thinking he or she does good presentations, will suddenly step back, look for additional evidence, and try to figure out what it is he or she needs to do to make better presentations, just to use that as an example. We know that that moment of being jarred into a perspective that your behavior may need to be modified or adjusted in some way is what we often think of as a learning moment. A moment when you are going to have to try out some new tactics to learn a new behavior. What we know, though, is that sometimes individuals do not take the feedback well. They ignore the information that they've been given, and instead of trying to learn from it, what they do is they ignore it, and we know then they have a learning loss. Perhaps you've seen it when you were in school and you were learning cricket, and your coach kept trying to get you to behave in certain ways in the different positions on the team. And some team members would do what the coach said and improved. Some did not, and they did not improve, and eventually wound up being removed from the team or at least set aside. We see the same thing in leadership, that when a person is in a particular context, there's some behaviors that he or she may need to learn more about in order to be more effective. The question is, can we do things to help accelerate that learning curve? Are there things we can do that when a person is in that space, when they realize that there's a change that needs to occur, can we facilitate that movement such that they gain and they turn the corner and achieve a new level of performance? We know that many people use different kinds of learning tactics. All of those learning tactics are designed to help them work through a very important sequence. That sequence is to become aware that there's something that needs to shift or change or be modified, to accept that that particular behavior needs to be adjusted and that the impact that behavior has is indeed one that needs to be altered, to take action to modify in order to communicate more clearly, for example, with a group of people, to build a new behavior or a new pattern and blend that new behavior into everyday life so that they can see the consequences. In point of fact, the entire platform that we've created at Matrix Insights is designed to help an individual go from discovery in terms of awareness of various behavior patterns, the impact of those behavior patterns on various competencies and various skills, and learn how to apply a new set of behaviors in order to develop in a more dynamic and active way. We've designed the system to do that in each of the lenses that we use to help a person become aware of their behavior. We know that there are different kinds of learners. There are those who are more academic, and there are those who tend to be more what we think of as active street kind of learners. They're curious. They want to understand. They want to make sure that they can apply something that they've just heard. We know, furthermore, that if we have all this information that we can communicate to managers, young managers, middle managers, and we can do so with great confidence about what leads to effectiveness for leadership around the globe. Further, we have enormous evidence about what adults need in order to facilitate learning. And yet, there's a gap of action. We know that there's a no, that is to say, we get feedback that perhaps we need to be more strategic. We might research what that means, but we don't act on that information. And the question might well be, why is this no-do gap such a problem? The challenge is that it's in our nature. I think of door A as the automatic response. It's the response we've given as we've come along in our careers. It's the responses that's tied into our personality. It's what we have in fact done in order to be the kind of person we are. And often when we're learning something, we have to choose another door, that is to say, another path of response that's very intentional. And the challenge is that it's uncomfortable. As human beings, we are wired to seek pleasure, to avoid pain, and to find a very efficient path to achieve both. So imagine a young manager is being told that he needs to work on building an effective team, and he thinks that he might in fact just go tell people what they need to do to be effective team members. And yet what most people need is not to be told, but to be respectfully listened to as they share their perspective. If that young manager doesn't have it in his or her experience to be a patient listener, and it is in his or her experience to consistently simply command and direct people, then he is going to do what seems comfortable and not do that which is uncomfortable because he doesn't have the training or skill to do it. And he does it in lightning speed, meaning he goes directly to the command and control behavior as opposed to developing a very effective listening strategy to try to show interest and regard for what other members of the team can contribute. We all are caught in this nature, this human nature, to go after that which is most comfortable, avoid that which is least comfortable, and to do so quickly. Door A is our automatic response. It is our most comfortable response. Door B that we can choose as managers and leaders is in fact an intentional response that's going to require us to pay attention to behavior and require us to be very focused learners. Any behavior we can identify, every single behavior we seek to change, every single behavior we want to express as leaders and managers in our organizations are influenced by our lessons of our past, and that is everything from things we learned in childhood to different roles we've learned throughout our careers, to our basic makeup, meaning our personality patterns, the factors in our personality and our emotional makeup. Situational factors influence behavior, which we need to try to understand when we're especially in a learning space. And then that very magical element that we refer to as learning agility, the capacity to quickly identify that you need to learn something and to act on it in a way that you can apply the new insight quickly. If we take basic makeup as just one illustration, we know that emotions are one of the most powerful aspects embedded in human behavior. In fact, if there is a door A, it is most evident in our emotional responses. There have been so many researchers who've taken a look at how our emotions play into our dispositions and our personality, and many researchers who've taken a look at, indeed, when we think we're doing something for one reason, we in fact are doing it to take care of, most of the time, an emotional discomfort which we've now rationalized, and we've rationalized often in very elaborate ways. We know whether you are in Chongqing, China, or Goa, India, or Singapore, or you're in Washington, D.C., that these basic emotions, caring, love, and joy, anticipation, interest, and surprise, anger, disgust, embarrassment, fear, and sadness, are automatically in the wiring of human beings. This is a part of our basic makeup. People don't make us have emotions. We have them ourselves. Our emotions are so profoundly interwoven with our perceptions and beliefs, and they serve us as a way of giving us information about ourselves. For example, when we're angry about something, what we're really discovering is that that anger is prompted by a feeling or belief that we've been treated unfairly, that we have been had a violation of agreement, or someone has judged us incorrectly or put a barrier in our way. Now here's what's interesting. Even though that's true, that's the basic principle of anger, what we realize is that indeed what triggers anger for one person is a source in some cases of pleasure for another. So for those of you who may have been exposed to personality patterns such as sensing and thinking, and sensing and feeling, intuiting, thinking, intuiting, feeling, some of you will hear those words and you'll think, what is that about? Many of you may have been exposed to personality type, and the idea being a detailed analytical person, a detailed other person focused individual, or big picture thinker, or big picture idea generator, which have to do with these four patterns, are prompted to have certain kinds of responses in situations. So folks with sensing and thinking enjoy structure, order, and clarity, and precision. And what really gets them irritated is when folks have vague ideas and throw out random information. For them, they go immediately to door A, which is to find structure, order, and clarity. And anyone who's communicating in a sort of random possibility, vague way, is a source of discomfort. And so they find themselves being annoyed. We could go down the list, and the same pattern is the same. The point simply being that each and every one of us have our own door A's, and when we don't get a chance to go in those doors, we find that we get annoyed, and we find that it gets in our way to be effective in learning something that we might need in a particular situation. In fact, we know that there are 54 specific skills that are vital to being effective in a leadership management role that have to do with our emotional lives. Now, these skills vary in their importance depending on the level of responsibility that a person has. But continuing with this as an example, as I started on this journey with you, what we have in the Matrix Insights platform is in fact the data on the 54 particular competencies that you see listed here. Individuals can rate themselves across bulleted behavior benchmarks. They can get feedback from others about their various behaviors. They can explore it and get more detail about what in fact it means, in this case, to know how to reframe. And that is an important part of the learning experience, to not only have a rating and know where you are, but also to be able to research the behavior in a deeper way. In fact, in Matrix Insights, we have emotional competencies, which I just shared with you, personality type lenses, which I've actually alluded to. We have an assessment related to interaction styles and essential motivators. And for those who are interested in more traditional sort of assessment of personality, the Big Five, which in our model is the Performance Five, gives you a chance to take a look at your behavior. Any one of those are intended to give you insight to start on the journey, which I alluded to just a bit ago, that journey of awareness into insight to understand the impact of your behavior across an array of competencies and skills, and to enable you to get some action tips and to build a development plan such that you indeed, beginning wherever you started in the journey, whether it's taking a look at emotional competencies or interaction styles or personality factors, you can begin that journey of discovery and work on those particular competencies that will enable you to be more successful. So, for example, we know that the capacity to deal with ambiguity, this is just one particular piece, one illustration, we know that the capacity to deal with ambiguity is essential to being able to deal and lead in systems and to deal with complexity. For some individual, the word ambiguity itself creates a great deal of discomfort. It's not their doorway. For others, it is. It's a very comfortable place. They see it as intriguing and inspiring. We know that to deal with ambiguity, to be able to deal with ambiguity in a productive way, a person has to understand that in leading, you are in a constant state of managing polarities. That's the only way you can deal with ambiguity, to understand that there isn't one answer, but there's a dynamic, energetic answer between being critical and supportive, being strategic and tactical, being tough and compassionate, all the various competencies we've talked about. In fact, we could put them out and look at what is the polarity that's present that a person needs to learn to manage. Here's an example. If I'm very expansive, then that typically comes with the benefit of being very flexible. If I overplay being expansive, I begin to display behaviors where I lack direction. On the other hand, if I'm working on being focused, I tend to show a clear sense of accomplishment and direction. While if I overplay that, I begin to be perceived as rigid and lacking an ability to be innovative. So what we do on the Matrix Insight platform is by bringing this sort of knowledge to your awareness, we, by virtue of the fact that you've completed the assessments, we use those information points to help frame and enhance your perception of the details you need in order to move forward, to look at the links and the applications of the details you need to move forward, and what kind of stretch assignments would enable you to achieve the kinds of things you need to achieve, whether it's learning how to manage ambiguity more clearly, learning how to be a better listener, learning how to deal with conflict in a more effective way, learning how to be more influential, especially with your partners who are working in all different parts of the world. One of the other subtleties, and it is what we believe to be the kind of thing that enables us to actually be particularly successful, is that the language of the learner, and we know that language by virtue of how he or she has answered the self-awareness questionnaires in the Matrix system, that language is really important, that it speaks to the person, because the meaning of the message of what a person may need to do to become more effective is in the receiver of that message. And so we know that small steps over time lead to major changes. And in our system, We designed it so that individuals, in this particular example, here's an action tip, a person who might have gone the route of personality type could take a look at what it would require for him or her to work more effectively with a different type. You see here ESTJ working with ISTJ. So if you're a learner in our system, you get these action tips of things that you can do to more effectively work with someone who's different. You identify competencies as a leader that's going to enable you to be more effective, and explore those competencies from multiple angles. Rate them to identify the kinds of things and prioritize the kinds of things that will enable you to zero in on the behaviors vital to success. Here's a competency of managing change and complexity, which has a variety of tips that are put in the form of questions. Another strategy, a learning strategy we use inside of the Matrix Insight system to help individuals work through their challenges so that they can speedily go through that learning cycle that I mentioned earlier in order to get to the behavior they need for effectiveness. It is our commitment to continue to look at the question of what leads to effectiveness for leaders. It is further our commitment to pay attention to the flow of evidence for what enables a person behaviorally to be successful, what also is the kind of thing a person needs, the kind of information and the kind of experiences they need in order to learn those things that will enable them to have the success that they seek. We have found that the question that faces leaders around the world today, whether it's a question of being inside a manufacturing environment, being inside a financial services environment, is really getting a good handle on the kind of learning that a person needs to have in order to be more effective in his or her environment. Leadership agility and learning agility in many ways are one and the same. To be an agile learner is to extract from your experience a lesson that you can use right away. To be an agile leader is to be a leader who quickly sees how the direction is unfolding and whether or not that direction needs to be adjusted, whether or not there is sufficient alignment of resources and individuals' perspectives and efforts to achieve that direction, and what is needed to foster commitment. Because what we know is that all leaders need to work through people. They need knowledge that will enable them to work through people in the most effective way if they're going to get the results that are essential for their success. My goal has been to present you with key research trends of what we know about leaders and organizations from around the world that lead to success. Some of those will resonate with you, some of those facts will, others will not, based on your particular operation. I've worked in Goa, India, and know with different executives of different companies that some of the items are more effective depending on the operation and depending on the degree of globalization within that operation. I know that some of the strategies are effective for you when you're dealing, let's say, with folks from North America, and other strategies are more relevant when you're dealing with people who may be from your next door neighbors, perhaps in Singapore or Hong Kong. I hope this information has prompted you to think about what leadership behaviors are essential for success in your organization, and that you see that we know we have a technology that shows us how to blend together the evidence and to blend together the tactics necessary for a person to learn at the speed of need through the use of what we believe to be the most complete gathering of insights around leadership and development in one place. So thank you for your time today and your willingness to listen in as I covered these particular issues and examples. And I know we wanted to leave time for questions, which I'll now open the door for us to have any questions or items that you'd like for me to respond to.
To reach out to me with questions at that email address, or to follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we very much appreciate your interest today. I have not seen a specific question as yet,